I'm Leroy Garcia, and this is Blue Rain Gallery Podcast. Today, we're on the main floor of the gallery with three special guests. I've known all these three for a long time. My daughter, Leah Garcia, Helen Tindel, and Gabriel Mozart Abeyta. And I wanted to do this a long time ago. It's just getting everybody together has been really hard. But all three of these young people come from famous families with lineage of many decades of art in families, many generations. And I thought it'd be nice to hear a little bit about how it was growing up in an artistic home. So we'll start with Gabriel over here.
Yeah.
Let her rip. Tell us how it was.
So growing up with my mom and dad, I realized that they weren't really my mom and dad. They kind of felt like young artistic teenagers. And that was very difficult, but also very rewarding in the sense that it was like leaving Taos Pueblo, going straight to Venice, Italy. You know, my parents told me I had to go to every church or museum and pick out 5 paintings that I love and 5 paintings I hate from like the age of, I think I was 9 till 12 and 9 till 11. And so that was really interesting, but they never sat down and they never showed and taught me how to like do the art. And I think that usually came from the subconscious later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you, Helen?
It was pretty chaotic. Both of my parents were heavily immersed in the art world and weren't really focused on raising us or providing us with a traditional family environment. So it was just really creative and expressive and definitely chaotic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, same as both Helen and Gabe. I didn't realize that it was not normal to be so immersed in art. I thought it was something that, you know, every kid's childhood was. And it wasn't until I got older till I started going to other friends' houses and seeing their parents have normal jobs and whatever that I realized I was different, you know, having my mom work in the living room and the kitchen. Art was just always all around me.
So I should have also said this before, but owning Blue Rain for 33 years at this point, I had the fortune, the blessing of representing all of your parents. Your mom's not with us anymore, but she was a big part of our beginning journey too. Mm-hmm. Leah was reminding me I need to tell everybody about who the parents are. So I'm Leah's dad, and her mother is Tammy Garcia. Helen, her mom was Margaret Bagshaw Tindel. She comes from a 4th generation painting family extraordinaire from Santa Clara, Pueblo. And then Gabriel Abeyta, his father's Tony Abeyta, and his mother is Patricia Michaels, famous designer. And so you guys have had influence of art in your lives. What kind of direct influence have they had in your life? Gabe, start with you.
So the direct influence?
As far as artistry.
I think the big part is storytelling. My mom has been one of the biggest influences in the world to me, and the fact that she has been able to express and tell any kind of form of storytelling through her clothes, which I think is incredible. You know, every single dress that she has this beautiful narrative to it. And it was just also growing up in Taos Pueblo, you know, not being around electricity so much sometimes, you know, we had to keep ourselves entertained with coming up with stories with branches and making our own toys.
So for those that don't know, Taos Pueblo, they live the old way. There's not really running water,
no.
Right? No electricity, so there's not a lot of TV stuff going on.
Yeah. And then when it came to my dad, you know, I think the best thing that I learned from my dad is being a good salesman. And I actually learned that from you too. Mm-hmm. It's just funny you mentioned, you know, I remember my dad first coming into the gallery, and I remember kind of seeing the two good salesmen coming together with their own narratives and talking shop. So that's the amazing thing, because I realized that sometimes it's hard to kind of understand what's going on in our head, you know, and to be able to translate that. And, you know, my dad having such good storytelling skills and my mom having such good storytelling skills, especially if you ever been to, when they were married together, if you ever had dinner with them, the stories they told just made everyone laugh all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing for me as an artist is is I don't want it to be, shallow. I want to be able to, that's me experiencing my subconscious and being able to, if you ever have a chance to stand with me and look at my art and have me tell you about it, we're going to find something new that I've totally forgotten that I've lived through.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And Helen, having a mother and 2 grandmas that were famous, and then your dad too, don't forget him, Greg, very talented as well. So how did all this influence you?
I learned to not be afraid of using whatever tool or medium I wanted to use. So frequently I etch into my panels with whatever knives or nails are around me. I pour resin, I use pen on top of oil, and I use spray paint, and I use pegboard. And I've even had acrylic paintings in the bathtub. So they really taught me to be experimental. And they also taught me, kind of going off of Gabe's point, like art should evoke an emotional response. And for that to happen, I have to pour myself into the art. So it's connected to me, and that will never be severed.
Nice. Well, Leah, you've lived in an art gallery most of your life and in a studio as well. So how did this influence you?
One of my earliest memories, I don't know, I was maybe like 5 or maybe younger, I don't know. Back in Taos when we had the gallery, I would go to work with you, and on the computer I would make these like digital paintings, on like the art app on the old Microsoft computers. And I would print them out and I would tape them on the wall and I would write a little price tag, $5 or whatever.
That's so cute.
And people would come and buy them and I'd go get ice cream or whatever. But yeah, definitely started hustling at a young age.
I remember Leah and her sister did a finger painting show when Leah was about 9 years old and Elena was 5. And there was about 15 paintings and they sold out in about 10 minutes. That's awesome. I had to take the money away, but I said, well, we better not start this. It could be a bad habit. So, but yeah, that's funny. How was it growing up during the time your parents were getting ready for Indian market?
That was always a nightmare. I would always avoid my father. It's not, he's so intense. He leaves everything to the last minute. And that's just how both of my parents are, sadly. And they're always creating, always constantly creating, but I think that they work better on a deadline. And I think that's just, they're very extreme. And because of that, it's almost like that extra edge just gets them. So they really just need, and as I've gotten older, I've understood it now too, that, you really just need your space. And I've just understood that, just leave them alone and do your own thing. The nice thing about Indian market for me is that I've never taken Indian market the very fancy bougie way everybody did. I always did it so punk rock. You can see through my art. It was always so punk rock that, it's like, I just do my own thing, It's like, everybody's like, oh, you're getting ready to go to like the fancy table thing? And I'm like, no. It's like, well, it looks like you weren't invited. It's like, I don't care. And then you get all these new people coming in being all like, I have all these followers. And I'm just like, I don't care. I've been born here. I was just like, I was in my mom's stomach while all this was happening. You're new to me. Like, I don't care how famous you are. So
awesome. Helen, how about you?
Very similar. Indian market was the time I wanted to stay away from my parents. I also had to be very careful where I walked in the house because everything was wet. So just waiting for paintings to dry and these deadlines, and then also the rush for Indian market night when it was a gallery show. My mom's getting ready and I'm a little kid and she's snapping at me and I'm crying and we're about to go to the gallery, and then I have to pretend like everything's fine and be quiet. And then also trying to hustle these like finger paintings while telling everyone I don't want to be an artist. And then my dad would like live at the shop because he's the framer to the stars. And it would just be this like last minute thing. School usually starts the week before Indian market. And I would show up with like a legal pad and a pen to like third grade. And then be like, where are your scissors? Where are your crayons? And be like, my mom said I'll have them next week. And they always wanted to like call my mom and scold her. And I'm like, don't call her, don't call her, don't call her. So it was interesting and just this wild experience that I'm glad that I can relate to you all about this, because I think it's so unique.
Yeah, definitely. I remember like the whole month of August, we weren't allowed in my mom's studio. Like if we bothered my mom, we got in trouble. Dad, your studio was locked. She was working. And we usually stayed with my grandma, and she would take us to school and get us all the school supplies and everything. And our family like is kind of flip-flopped. Like our family vacations didn't happen till the winter, because the summer was when, the gallery's busy. My mom's busy working. So yeah, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, but then the slow season is when, we'd go to Disneyland or whatever.
Yeah, those were fun times. Okay, so let's talk about how you developed your styles. And we'll start with Gabe. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past podcasts we've done with you, but let's go ahead and talk about it again. How did you develop your style, and talk about the influence of both your mom and your dad?
A lot of it is really influenced by my mom, in the sense that my mom's always been my hero. My dad wasn't really present because he was always at school, or he was always painting, or he was always doing something in the gallery. And I just hung out in my mom's studio all the time, listening to the Cranberries and Bjork while she painted on fabric. And, a lot of it's watercolor. And with my dyslexia, not knowing anything better about what these things were, I went to my dad's studio and I just saw these little bottles that said golden, and it just ended up being acrylic. And then I put it on clay board because it just looks shiny and nice and smooth to me. It all kind of originated from a lot of sadness and depression. I started a lot of my art at the Matador, and those colors came from, a few things,
How could you see anything down there?
I know. Isn't that insane? That's so insane. I was just thinking
So
about
the Matador is a dive bar here in Santa Fe, and it's dark. It's in a dungeon.
And that's
Totally.
what the funny thing is that like that was my first gallery, I guess you could say, and that was my first art studio. I just, the thing is I didn't like being alone. I really have been really not. I'm such an extroverted person, and being around all those people, and especially the conversations everybody would have. Like Cesar's really an intelligent person that I've got to learn so much about punk rock and governmental things and, history about the United States. And that was just, I learned more history from the Matador than I actually did from school.
That's amazing.
And it was just like great podcasting while I did all of the art, and people would come up and be like, and that was the greatest thing, because the whole term ugly pie came from I didn't want nepotism. I just didn't want people to come and say, it's like, the only reason why people are buying your paintings because you're Tony Abeyta's son. I was just like, I don't think any of my dad's clients are going to go down to the Matador, to tell you the truth. And that nobody goes down there besides us punk rock people. And I sold like 300 paintings down there. And so a lot of it all kind of came from, David Lynch, the subconsciousness, and art therapy and rebellion.
Yeah. Well, I do see a couple things, your mom's influence, but also your dad's, the color palette on a lot. And I remember you did a video for us on your dad doing his charcoals. Yes. With the inks mixed in there. And it has that same type of influence.
And during that time too, my mom was such a huge muse to my father. I mean, if you look at all of the early work my mom was doing, those charcoal paintings are just mirrors of what my dad saw from my mom. And he started doing that during the divorce. And, that La Fonda in Taos, those big charcoal ones were his way of just getting out. I have a couple
myself.
Nice.
Helen, how about you?
What was the question again?
The question is, how did you develop your style, and what was the influence of your ancestors, your mom, your grandmas?
I developed my style by just imbibing all of these influences that were around me. I saw Abeyta drawing in the traditional flat style and using casein paints. And I saw my grandma Helen's sketches and early works and later works. And my mom started out with Prismacolor and pastel, and then she turned into an oil painter. And my dad makes frames, so it was gilding and shellacs and carving and clay and handmade gesso. So I really just got to see everything, and their influence was to make me fearless and creative and expressive, and not to be afraid to combine anything and to be able to break these rules. I'm not a traditional oil painter.
Yeah, your
I didn't
style
go
is
to art
nothing like
school.
theirs, right?
Exactly. Like, I can have my own style, and that's totally fine. And I know that my family would be proud.
Yeah, I think so. Leah.
So coming from a long lineage of Pueblo potters, I feel like it was always an expectation I had to, be the next person in the lineage to carry on pottery. So I kind of always fought that my whole life. I felt these expectations, so I pushed away, and I wanted nothing to do with pottery. Even though I grew up with it, grew up eating clay off my mom's work table.
She did.
And it wasn't until I got older that I found photography, and I started doing a family history project where I started documenting the pottery process. So I spent a lot of time with my mom and my grandma and my aunt, just photographing, doing interviews. And eventually it got to the point where I felt like I just needed to start making pottery. So I kind of gave up on the whole documentary project. And now I'm, just learning from the clay. And since pottery has been around for so long, and the Pueblo people didn't have a written language, we told our stories through the clay. So you find a lot of imagery of like wildlife, flowers, even some landscapes. So I'm starting off small, just from the simple imagery. One of my favorite designs I did this past year was a star plate where I did stars all around the surface of it, and I did a mica wash, and it was called Starry Night. But just really simple, organic shapes, styles.
Yeah. So discovering yourself as artists, and I think we've asked this in the past, but how has that influenced the realization of your heritage? Like, do you appreciate your heritage more by being an artist?
Oh, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, making Pueblo pottery, not only is it an honor, but it's also a responsibility to, keep the tradition alive, and making sure it doesn't die out.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
I think a big part of Pueblo culture is our connection to the land, and especially this land. And through my art, I've been able to strengthen my connection to the land in my own way, in a very spiritual way. And I'm always curious about what connects me to my ancestors in the past. And I really have discovered that through nature. And I wonder what it's like being in Santa Clara in these like really hot days in the past, and then the monsoon just breaking down and experiencing these torrential rains and the wind and the heat. And I know that we all have that in common. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like it has helped me to connect to my lineage in a very personal way.
Yeah. And Gabe has lived a little bit different than you, been more involved in Taos Pueblo, living there. And again, Taos Pueblo is a village that lives the old way. They don't have running water or electricity. And so how did this affect you, Gabe?
So funny. My sister's husband, the first time he came in, we were telling him about it. I was like, what is this, like the 1600s? And I was like, yes.
Basically, yeah.
He's just like, no, it's not. And then like he went and was like, oh, okay. And then he couldn't, because he came in and he was just like, because being from Europe and, everything's really old there. And He just comes to America and it's like, nothing's old here. And then he looks at Taos, he's like, oh, I guess hard for him to understand. I think it's hard for anybody to understand how old Taos is. Ceremonies in Taos are really hard. They're very difficult. There's tremendous amounts of them that are happen all year round, nonstop. And the people from my pueblo are some of the strongest people. And the reason why Taos is so beautiful is because of how much work everybody has to do. All my aunties, my uncles, and my cousins, they are working full stop. And those things are the hardest things I've ever had to go through. They've also taught me how to be humble. And I've never been able to break away from it. Those, from the day I was born till we got to Venice, Italy, which was 9 years old, that was my life. And there was so much of just being around that. And then half of the rest of my life has been in Europe. And when it comes down to answering that question, living in Barcelona for the last 4 years, I needed a break from being Native American. I just needed to be human. Nobody cared if I was Native in Barcelona because everybody was like, had a Filipino friend, a Maori friend, somebody from Japan, somebody from China, somebody from everywhere. Germany, Austria, Ukraine, Russia. It's all a melting pot. And when people heard my music, they were just like, oh, like you do that Black Blood song. I go, home. And I tell this, and it was crazy because I thought that was just rock, but he's like, no, that's Pueblo. And then somebody says, like, that's Native. And I was like, oh shit, that's me. And then, I looked at all the art and in the subconscious of it all, and I just like, oh, this is what I saw in the mountains, or, oh, this is just like the spirits that are in me, especially those parts that are here. Those are the way that the wind carves the rocks in Canyon de Chelly. I mean, I can't get away from any of it. And I don't want to. And it's more of like never me binding it. It's always just me always just vomiting out. Like in that sense, just like my mom, it's like, it's everything that I am. The thing is that like, I think there was a person who told me like, you're 1/4 Polish. And I was like, I know, I did my family tree. And then I took my mom and me to go to Poland. And as we were walking in Poland, I was like, Mom, look, these are our people. And then, and then we went to go do this all this Polish stuff. And then when I got back here, I didn't feel any more Polish. I still felt very Taos Pueblo. I mean, it was just too late for me. I'm not anything else.
This is hardcore culturally raised too. So one last question, and then we'll close this session. Where do you see yourself as an artist in 20 years? We'll start with Leah.
Well, I see myself as being an ambassador for Native people and Native artists, especially, being in the gallery. For those of you who don't know, my great grandma, her name was Blue Rain. And to me, I mean, I see her legacy, and I see this as being, a communal space for Native artists. And yeah, I love it.
And she's also the director of marketing for Blue Rain. That's pretty good. Very talented. You're all of you guys are very multi-talented people. Okay, how do you see yourself in 20 years as an artist?
Can I see right here?
Yes.
I see myself painting bigger. I see myself being more expressive, more confident, carrying on my family legacy and learning how to tell my story, which is their story, even better. And I see myself having a lot of fun. I think the most important thing is my personal growth and happiness and how that's going to influence my art. And hopefully I'm surrounded by lots of friends in this journey.
You will. How about you, Gabe?
The first thing that comes to mind is getting better at it. I would love to, this is just the start for me. And I love the innocence of where I'm at. And I love everything that I'm at. They're documentations of who I am. And I would just love to see it grow further and further. But the most important thing is I would love to get to a place where I'm able to give back to Taos. I would love to do shows and, allow people to know and if through the rest of the future, if you buy this painting, I would like to buy a guitar, an amplifier, and some guitar lessons to some kid in Taos Pueblo, or give a kid, a video camera and some editing equipment, because I don't ever want to give money away, but I want to give equipment away, because I was very fortunate to receive so many things, and everything to my people is the most important thing. The only reason why I do any of this was to make sure that I don't lose any more family members through drugs or alcohol, and I don't want to lose my people. That's my home. I've traveled so much around the world, and nothing feels better than seeing them, and I wish the best for them.
I think that's wonderful. And all three of you, giving back is an important thing we can all do. So I want to thank all three of you for coming in today and
thank you.
talking to us. I think this is important for people to understand and listen to. I'd like to
thank you.
encourage our...
Yeah, thank you all. This is great.
It was amazing.
Good therapy session.
Love working with you guys.
I'd like to encourage our followers to follow us on any of our podcasts by going to BlueRainGallery.com under the menu bar podcast or any platform that you subscribe. I also like to encourage you to visit our online store, BlueRainPrintShop.com. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.